The story begins with a number so shocking it barely seemed real. $3 billion worth of American milk, cheese, and butter, entire shipments of carefully packaged products loaded in refrigerated containers, rejected in less than 48 hours. Turned away at the Canadian border as if they were nothing more than unwanted baggage. For the farmers who had raised the cows, milked them every day at dawn, and shipped their hard-earned work north, it was not just a trade issue. It was a betrayal. Washington was left stunned. The White House silent. And yet, behind this entire episode, many analysts pointed to one man, Mark Carney, the financial strategist whose philosophy of hardline economic defense had become Ottawa's shield against U.S. pressure. His fingerprints, subtle but undeniable, seemed to be all over the strategy that turned America's abundance into America's crisis. Before we go further, don't forget to subscribe to Traveling Vibes. It helps the channel grow and ensures you don't miss the global stories that shape your everyday life. This wasn't just another trade quarrel. This was a perfect storm of overproduction, tariffs, and politics colliding with the brutal reality of perishable goods. Dairy is unlike steel, oil, or lumber. It spoils. It cannot sit in a warehouse for years. A blocked shipment of cheese or butter is not just paperwork, it's livelihoods collapsing in real time. Farmers in Wisconsin and California had already been pouring milk down drains in desperation. Now they face the ultimate humiliation. Their products, once destined for Canadian stores, were being reloaded and shipped back across the border like defective goods. To understand how the crisis exploded, we need to go back decades to the 1960s, when Canada built its supply management system. Designed to protect domestic farmers, this system tightly regulates how much dairy, poultry, and eggs Canadians can produce. It allows only a small window for imports from abroad, with tariffs designed to slam shut once quotas are exceeded. And these tariffs are not mild. They climb into the stratosphere, 200%, 250%, even 300% on certain products. In other words, once the limit is crossed, foreign dairy becomes unsellable in Canada. For years, the United States had grumbled about this, calling it unfair. France and New Zealand had complained too, arguing that Canada kept out their cheeses. But it was American farmers who took the hardest hit in 2025 when shipments worth billions were caught in the net. At first, the rejection looked like bureaucracy. Officials cited trade rules, quotas, paperwork. But those closer to the situation said otherwise. The decision carried political weight. It came at a moment when tensions between Washington and Ottawa were already rising over tariffs on lumber and digital services. Former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, who had returned to Canadian politics as a key economic strategist, was said to have supported the move as part of a broader plan to defend Canadian markets. Whether he pulled the trigger directly or not, his influence was unmistakable. Ottawa had just drawn a line in the sand, and American farmers were the collateral damage. What does a $3 billion rejection look like? Picture hundreds of shipping containers filled with Wisconsin cheddar, California blue cheese, and Vermont butter, all lined up at Canadian inspection points. Then, imagine them ordered to turn around. Some had already traveled thousands of miles, bounced from other countries before heading north. Others were part of high-profile marketing launches, timed for Canada's summer tourism season. With a single ruling, all of it vanished. Products that once carried prestige, triple cream bries, specialty batches from family creameries, were now treated like clearance items, shoved back into the U.S. market at rock-bottom prices. For consumers, this looked like a blessing. Bargain aisles lit up overnight with cheese discounts so steep shoppers thought it was a holiday sale. But behind the discounts was devastation. Farmers saw their incomes collapse. Retailers were forced to take stock at a loss. And much of the dairy, already aged, faced expiration before it could even be sold. The crisis exposed a deeper truth. The American dairy industry had long been vulnerable. In 2020, Wisconsin had about 7,000 dairy farms. By 2025, hundreds more had closed. Young farmers left the business. Families who had worked the same land for generations faced foreclosure. Milk dumping became a grim ritual. Farmers stood by as thousands of gallons spilled into wastewater systems, not because they wanted to, but because there was simply nowhere to sell. And now, with $3 billion in shipments suddenly re-entering the US market, the oversupply problem turned catastrophic. Back in Washington, silence reigned. Donald Trump, who had once railed against Canada's 250% dairy tariffs, appeared caught off guard. His allies scrambled for explanations. Governors from dairy-heavy states like Wisconsin and Minnesota demanded action. Lobbyists flooded Capitol Hill. But Ottawa held firm. This was not a negotiation. It was enforcement of the rules written into the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Under the deal, U.S. exports could claim only 3.6% to 6% of Canada's dairy market tariff-free. Once that limit was breached, Canada had every right to slam the door. And it did. Hard. The fallout rippled across every layer of the supply chain. Distributors tried to rebrand rejected products, stripping off Canadian labels and relaunching them domestically. But luxury cheeses don't belong in bargain bins. The aesthetics, the marketing, the exclusivity, it all vanished the moment they were shoved under fluorescent supermarket lights with clearance stickers. Companies bled cash, some shuttered plants, others laid off workers. Trucking firms that had been paid to deliver dairy across the border suddenly faced unpaid invoices for shipments that never made it. Cold storage warehouses filled beyond capacity, forcing desperate sellers to dump product at pennies on the dollar. What had started as a tariff enforcement became a multi-billion-dollar supply chain implosion. As this story comes to an end, one truth remains impossible to ignore. What happened with those rejected dairy shipments wasn't just about milk, butter, or cheese. It was about power, leverage, and survival in a world where trade agreements can turn into weapons overnight. $3 billion of American dairy was not simply denied entry, it was denied dignity. Products that farmers poured their sweat into, products that families built entire legacies around, were treated like disposable cargo, sent back across the border to rot or be sold for scraps. For many Americans, it felt like a gut punch, a reminder that even in a nation as vast and powerful as the United States, the livelihoods of small communities can be undone with a single political decision. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to the hidden battles behind the products we consume, make sure to subscribe to Traveling Vibes. Because these aren't just distant events happening to strangers.